Razorback fans, welcome back into episode 17 of Hawgs on the Hill, your go-to podcast for an in-depth dive into all things Arkansas Razorbacks. Join us as we dissect their victories, analyze the plays, and revel in the spirit of the Hawgs. Episode 17 is brought to you by Home Field. Step into the legacy of collegiate style with Home Field's premium vintage collegiate apparel. Embrace the spirit of your alma mater or even just your favorite team with their meticulously crafted, comfortable, and stylish collection. Elevate your game day attire and celebrate the rich history of college sports. Check out Home Field, where tradition meets comfort in every stitch. Use promo code Variety Sports in all caps to receive 15% off that first order. And we're back at you guys with another episode tonight. And we did our recap show on Sunday regarding the Oklahoma State game, and we're going to move on. That's all we can do as we look into this next week. Tough loss. I hate to see it, but we will move forward. And before we dive into we'll go over some other SEC scores throughout the week. Last week, you had Georgia beating Tennessee Tech 48-3. Texas taking down Michigan in the Big House 31-12. Alabama taking down South Florida 42-16. Ole Miss getting the win over Middle Tennessee 52-3. Missouri beating Buffalo 38-0. Tennessee going on the road and beating 24 NC State 51-10. Oklahoma beating Houston 16-12. LSU beating Nicholls State 44-21. A&M getting the win over McNeese 52-10. Cal going on the road and beating Auburn at home 21-14, where Auburn had 5 turnovers in this game and just did not look good at all. South Carolina beat Kentucky 31-6. Florida took care of Samford 45-7. Vanderbilt beat Alcorn State 55-0. And Arizona State beat Mississippi State at home 30-23. So for the most part, good weekend for SEC teams as a whole. Where you only had a few, being taken down. And like I said, probably the worst one is that Cal beating Auburn at their own home place. So
I think Auburn was favored by like 10 or 11 in that game or something. So that was a pretty significant upset.
Yeah, that's true. That was not a good look for Hugh Freeze in year 2 of his program there. Peyton Thorne looked terrible as he threw 4 interceptions himself. So
hopefully they do that against us.
Exactly. That'll be something we look forward to as we kind of preview that next week, as we'll open up conference play next week against Auburn. To jump in, not a lot going on in Razorback Nation this week. Not a lot of basketball news, not a lot of football news, as things kind of are relaxing a little bit. And we'll go ahead and jump over to Arkansas soccer for this week, where Arkansas last week was up to number 6 in the polls, and they took on BYU on September 7th. That evening after the Oklahoma State game, they got the win here 4-2. Anaya Robinson, she shined for her 3rd straight match where she netted 2 goals in this match. She scored Kate Doyle scored Arkansas's first goal in this match at the 9:54-minute mark on an assist from Kennedy Ball and Bella Field, which extended her scoring streak to 6 straight matches. And then you had Anaya Robinson score the 2nd goal for Arkansas and the first of her 2 at the 27:11 mark, off an assist from Ella Roger and Ava Tankersley. And then she scored her 2nd goal in the second half at the 47:19 mark and put Arkansas up 3-1 in this match. Arkansas's final goal then came in from Ava Tankersley off a penalty kick. And this crowd for this matchup had 3,046 fans in attendance, which is Arkansas's 3rd largest crowd. And Arkansas finished ahead on shots 19-13 with 12 on target. And Arkansas has now moved up to number 4 per the United Soccer coaches. I mean, it seems like this team's getting better and better each week.
Yeah, this was a fairly good matchup finally. I think there'd been kind of several blowouts outside of the tie with Michigan State, I believe it was. So this was a good one where at least they were able to get some shots on goal on us, or at least shots on us, Whereas our last couple of opponents, I mean, I think they had 3 shots combined. So defense is still phenomenal. Don't get me wrong, but it's good to be tested every now and then and just kind of see where you actually are without the level of dominance, from an opponent's matchup. So great win, great win. It's really good to see the fans turn out with this one being at home. I think we've talked about it over the last year plus, honestly, that this soccer program has really come a long way. The university has invested in this soccer program with the new pitch, the new fan seating areas, things of that nature, kind of spread out. It's a better environment to go watch a match at now and things like that. So that's helped out a lot. Plus, what you're seeing out there and the opponents we're bringing in and the product on the field is fun to watch. So it makes for a great fan experience to go out there. It's a little bit, more relaxing than like a football game, for example, kind of similar to maybe like a baseball game or something like that, where it's a good vibe. Everything's kind of chill. And then if you catch a really fun win and a couple of big things to cheer about here and there, it makes for a fun night. So go catch these games when you can, especially right now that the weather's really, really nice in the evenings. It's a great time to go out and watch some soccer on a weeknight. Get home, go to bed, do it all again the next day, those kinds of things. So get out and watch these girls. They're worth seeing.
100%. They're on a break till the 19th, till next week, where they'll take on LSU coming to town at 6:30 next Thursday. And they'll follow that up with another match on Sunday against Missouri at home as well. And then they'll finally hit the road towards the end of the month as they go on the road to take on Vanderbilt. So got a quick break here, and they'll get back in action next week as they start conference play. But yeah, like Seth said, just echoing that, I mean, this program is really in tune, and Colby Hale has got it built really well, where, yeah, we lost some pieces from last year, but he reloaded via the transfer portal and incoming freshmen. It looks like freshman Anaya Robinson is set to be a key piece down the stretch as she's developed so far into this young season. And I'm just excited to see what the rest of the season holds, and maybe, we can finally push through and get over that hump and maybe win an SEC championship, and then also make a push deep into the NCAA soccer tournament for these girls, as, they're consistently there every year. And, you can't ask for much more than that from a coach you've got here. So as we jump over, Arkansas volleyball is in full swing, where, over this weekend they had the WUPIG Invitational, and in the finale they swept all 4 matches here as they took down Rutgers 3-0, Wichita State 3-0, Louisiana Tech 3-0, and Little Rock 3-0. Winning all 3 sets in each of those matches. And Zoe Evans was named SEC Player of the Week for Arkansas volleyball. So, it seems like they're picking up right where they left off after that NCAA tournament run last year.
Yeah, you can't beat that, man. They've had a great start to the year. A lot of good fan turnout already as well. I think you'll see more of that as the season progresses. We start getting better opponents and things like that. But can't ask for a better start, man. They're kind of dominating everybody they've played so far.
Yeah, 100%. You got to love where, this is at. We saw Jillian come back and actually is on staff this year after, she was pretty crucial to that run we had last year. She came back and is now on staff for this Arkansas Razorback team. So it's going to be, I think, another fun year of Arkansas volleyball, as that is now in swing as well. We'll jump over to Arkansas softball, where, yes, we know it's the fall. Football is here, and you got those fall sports going, but Arkansas softball will be having several fall ball games this upcoming fall, starting on September 20th, where they will be doing their Razorbacks Unlimited style play. There's the I think is it Athleta Unlimited, like the professional softball they do, that it has some interesting scoring to other than just runs and common softball. So Arkansas will be having 3 of those matches in this fall: September 20th, October 10th, and October 25th. And then they will be actually doing some scrimmages where they'll be playing Seminole State on the 26th, Missouri State on the October 6th. They'll be at Tulsa on October 12th, taking on Tulsa. And then the same day, they have a doubleheader where they'll be taking on Oklahoma State at Tulsa as well. They'll be playing Oklahoma Christian and Arkansas Tech as well. And all those that will be here in Fayetteville are open to the public and free. So get out there and watch some fall softball if you want. I think this team could be set up for another good year.
Yeah, I think everybody's got a sour taste in their mouths over the last couple of years, the way regionals have gone. So the team always does well. It's just, can we get over that hump and have a deeper postseason run? So I think that's going to be what everybody's eyes are looking at. And some of these early, fall matchups will help you get there, really evaluate where your team's at before the season even starts, later in the spring. So it'll be a fun time of year to kind of go out there and see some nonchalant softball, things played a little bit differently than they might be. Some players getting more action than they might normally. It's never a bad thing at all, and you can really evaluate who you got on your team from top to bottom. So it'll be a good time to go out there and catch some fall ball for sure.
Yeah, and then just today before we jumped on here, the softball released their conference schedule for this upcoming season, and so we now know our home opponents, away opponents, and I think they set Arkansas up for a great first conference series here as they travel on the road to Ole Miss. But I think probably the biggest series that will be for the entire season is we have Oklahoma coming to Bogle Park. If that's not going to be one hot ticket to buy, I don't know what will be, but that you have one of the best softball teams over the past 4 to 5 years. If you really want to test yourself and compare yourself to one of the best, perfect opportunity.
Yep. Depending on how our season goes and how our team is looking, that could be a tremendous matchup with a lot riding on it from an SEC potential. So I think there's going to be a lot of fan turnout for that.
If you can steal a series at home, that would be big.
Oh, yeah.
Then you have a road series at Tennessee, come back home, play Kentucky, go on the road to Florida, South Carolina at home, at Texas A&M, and finish up conference play at home versus LSU. So a lot of good softball going to be happening at Bogle Park this upcoming season. Even other than Oklahoma match, you've still got Kentucky that's usually really good, South Carolina that's good. All these SEC teams are top tier teams, and then you add Oklahoma this year for the first year in SEC play, and it just it seems to take it to a whole new level.
Texas isn't bad either, so throwing them in the mix too, that's another usually decent softball team to worry about. So the SEC is going to have a lot of talent, a lot of good teams, and they're probably going to all beat up on each other throughout the year. So it'll be fun to see who kind of comes out looking the prettiest by the end of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I can't wait. We had season tickets last year and got out to several softball games, and it doesn't disappoint. It seems like year after year, new crowd records are set at Bogle, and I think if this is the case and that keeps happening, they're going to have to expand at some point. And what a better way to have a softball program that
you're outgrowing your shoes.
Yeah, exactly. 8 to 10 years ago, that probably wasn't the case. But ever since Courtney Deifels came in and taken over this program, it's just been upward, and the trajectory is still going up as she continues to bring in high level recruits. Like this year's recruiting class was insane. It has some of the top recruits in the country, and so she's reloading that program again. And we'll jump over to Arkansas baseball, where Baseball America has ranked Arkansas's transfer class as the number 2 transfer portal class. This is nothing new for Arkansas fans. If you're any fans of baseball, Arkansas had 8 top 100 transfers out of the transfer portal. And, we saw how last season ended. Wasn't great. We were the number 4 national seed, lost at home. You hate to see that, but I think, Coach Dave Van Horn is reloading this team. And transfers, freshmen both. You lose your starting rotation with Hagan, Brady, and Mason Molina all going into the draft. But Arkansas did turn around and add 2 of the best left-handed pitchers in the transfer portal. You've got Landon Beadshields from Ohio State, was 6-7 last year with a 4.15 ERA. Zach Root from East Carolina, 6-2 with a 3.56 ERA. It's two lefties that are probably going to be your, in your rotation, and then that third spot could be up for grabs between. You've got Gage Wood returning, several other guys. What was that?
You've got Gabe Geckel back.
Gabe Geckel.
And he could do anything for you. Swiss Army knife, McIntyre, who knows?
100%. So, I think what Dave's got going right here could be set Arkansas up for another postseason run. I mean, that's the norm around Arkansas for baseball nowadays. Or I'll say that's the floor, is making the tournament. They also added Charles Davlin, hit 288, 413, and 514 last season at Florida Gulf Coast. And then infielder Camden Kozel hit 284, 349, and 439, and will most likely be starting at second base this season. And, other than that, you've got Vahiva Aloy returning. You've got his brother that transferred over from BYU, Kahio Aloy, as well as Nolan Souza's back. So there's a lot of young pieces that, could take another step forward for this Arkansas baseball program.
Yeah, you can't forget Ryder Helfrich either behind the dish potentially. I think we picked up another transfer catcher, so there'll be more competition there. But he had some good at-bats for us. I think he needs to adjust to the college game a little bit, and so I'm hoping that happens over this offseason and stuff. I think that's what the coach speech has kind of been, that he's come a long way in a short amount of time and could be a tremendously better player than he even was last year. So there's a lot of hype on this team. I mean, getting some of the freshmen to come in that we did as well. Jackson Wiggins, Carson Wiggins, I believe is his name. That's a huge pickup just from a pitcher that's going to be around for a couple years, hopefully, and really do big things for us. Got tremendous velocity, just like his brother. And I think he's got potential to be a little bit better than his brother, even from the reports. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. You get in with Matt Hobbs for a couple of years, and who knows what he can become. Just look at some of the guys that we've had come through. Didn't start out just as freakazoids, but turned into them. Hagen Smith really comes to mind. Kevin Kopp's come to mind. Guys that Matt Hobbs really performed his evolution, if you will, and by their junior, senior years, they were, top level talent. So I think we've got another good reset, rebuild, combination between transfers, freshmen, a couple guys coming back like Kendall Diggs, could have a big year if he's fully healthy. So this team's going to have as much potential as any team in the past to make it all the way. It's just baseball sometimes has a lot of luck into it. And so can we get a little bit luckier this year? Can we hit the ball a little bit better at the right times? That's what it boils down to, because the talent is going to be there year in and year out. And I think the coaching is going to be there year in and year out. It's just, do the chips fall your way when it really matters or not?
Yeah, I was about to say, you took the words out of my mouth there. I was going to say, I don't think there's any question about talent. It's execution, at the right time. Over the past few years, I think it's safe to say that the Arkansas teams over the past few years has really excelled all throughout the regular season, kind of hit their peak in, middle end of the regular season. And once they made it to postseason, kind of struggled a little bit, especially the past two seasons, getting knocked out at home in regionals where you were hosting. So I think that's something that you've got to find, a way to continue that success.
You got to get some
postseason.
Sorry, you got to get a couple scout team pitchers that throw it in about the 70s, because that's what's always been biting us, is we get into postseason play in the regionals, and a lot of the teams we face don't have the velocity that we're used to seeing in the SEC, and it throws everybody off. So,
you play some of those smaller schools, like Southeast Missouri that we played. Their pitchers aren't throwing as high velocity, and it's almost like
a struggled
100%. So, it'll be interesting to see how we change up prep, and or if we do. I think Dave knows he's got to change some things. He even addressed that in the post-game conference after that regional, where he said, even talking about the guys that he recruits in. He said we've got to have more than just those home run hitters, guys that can step up there and hit the bomb. We need some guys that can come in here and hit some doubles, singles, even triples, get the ball in play and, get those base runners going.
Yep. I think they've done a decent job at that. It's just going to depend on how it comes to fruition on the field and what lineup is going to be the most consistent. That's one of the biggest things in baseball is just being consistent day in and day out. It's hard. It's very hard. But I've got faith, man. We've got some of the best coaches in the country. We've got some of the best players in the country. Hope we can put it together this year and make at least a deeper run, make it to Omaha, if nothing else. I'd love to see us, make a real deep run in Omaha even. But I think if you don't make it to Omaha this year after a couple of years of that same pain, I don't think there's going to be coaching conversations need to happen necessarily. Maybe some assistant coaches, but it's going to be a tremendous disappointment, even more than I think the last couple of years. So got to find a way to get a little further this time.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. You don't want to see anybody lose their job, but at some point, performance, you're being paid to have these kids perform, and if you don't do that, then there's got to be a change. So, as we get ready to jump over to our preview with UAB this weekend, we got to tell you about our new sponsor over here with Jared's Kick and Sauce. If you want a sauce that's good on everything, like it says on the bottle, it's the sauce to go to. We had it down this weekend. We had a watch party down in Fort Smith together, and this was a very popular dipping sauce this weekend. I mean, Seth,
it's literally good on everything. Yeah, it's good on breakfast casserole. It's good on the Razorback chicken nuggets. It's good on pigs and blankets. Good on probably anything. Yeah, it's a very, very easy sauce to try on different things. Got a good combination of flavors in it. I think you guys will like it, so give it a shot.
Yeah, you got to love it. And then also, you can't forget about Scarlet Letter. Go check them out. Arkansas's very own homemade spiked seltzer. And as Seth's holding there, we've got their new triple berry vodka soda that they now have in cans that you can get in stores, or even if you're in Northwest Arkansas, head up to the Core Brewery in Springdale and check them out today. And, this is another week where Arkansas has a chance to bounce back, after a tough break last weekend. I think this is a game where you got to come in and really take care of business, and really a game that you're going to be favored in, a game that I don't think it'll be as lopsided score as UAPB, but it's another one of those games where I hate to call it a tune-up game, but one of those games where, you start conference play next week with Auburn, but another game to kind of work out some kinks, maybe throw in some more wrinkles, try some different things against a smaller tier opponent compared to what we would do against like Oklahoma State last weekend.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Scout us as like a 24.5-point favorite. I think that may be a little much, but see, I thought that about the UAPB game too. So who knows, man? We keep putting up 650 yards a game like we are right now. You can score a lot of points as long as you don't turn it over. So that's going to be obviously one of my biggest keys to the game is can we make some corrections for the mistakes that we had? I talk about it week in and week out. If you guys are friends of the show and listen to us pretty often, you're probably tired of hearing me talk about it. But mistakes are the biggest things that'll kill you, whether it's pre-snap penalties, post-snap penalties, unnecessary roughnesses, things like that, late hits out of bounds. Those are the ones that you really got to be mentally strong and not do, as well as obviously the turnovers. Turnovers killed us. I think special teams, we've got to make some at least adjustments or maybe some personnel changes on punt returns, not necessarily Satini returning the ball, but the punt coverage team that we've got had some hiccups there that really it could have cost us more than just the one time that it did in the Oklahoma State game. So can we make some of those corrections, play some clean ball? If we can get back to how we looked in the UAPB game, or at least remotely close, where you're scoring on most of your offensive possessions, even if it's field goals, I think we're going to be a little bit wary to kick field goals from here on out. But as long as you get kind of within that 25 or closer, if a drive stalls, maybe try kicking one. But if it's outside of that, I think you're going to see us go for it a lot. I think That's one thing I'll harp on real quick before we break down some of these plays here. But if we start going for it on fourth down a little bit more often than we used to, because we don't have Cam Little now, if we don't get it, fans need to stop freaking out saying that we made the wrong call, should have kicked it, because half the time we kick it, we're missing it. And I'd almost rather take the analytic risk. And generally, if it's 4th and 5 or less and you're on your side of the 40, I'd go for it under the assumption that you're not going to make the kick. So anyway, I am proud. The one special teams unit that I was proud of is our punt team. I thought they did a good job. Punter did a good job, and then the coverage team on punts did a good job. So keep that play up as well. But this will be a good game, kind of like you said, to retune at least a couple things. I thought we were striding on all cylinders pretty well in some areas. I thought our defense played quite well. I know we gave up some pass yards, but we talked about it on the recap show that we were intentional to stop the run. So we were wanting to give up pass yards and stop the run first. That's why I don't think there was a lot of pressures. Can we kind of flip the script here and have a little bit better showing from our defensive line on quarterback hurries, quarterback hits, sacks, things like that, tackles for loss? I think this game, we obviously match up a little bit better to have some better statistics on defense of that category. So it'll be a good game to watch that we should win by 2 to 3 touchdowns in my mind. And I'll be a little disappointed if it's a closer game than that.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The hype video / highlight guru War Machine here agrees with you. Going on that 4th and 5 was the right call. And I agree. I think we saw, last year Sam Pittman be a little too hesitant, in several situations where, the number of 4th and 1s last year. And I'm not just talking about lining up in the shotgun necessarily, but the number of 4th and 1s where we might have punted it or didn't go for it, things like that. And I think, Sam's even said in a press conference before the season began, he said, he's going to stop relying on analytics necessarily as much and go with his gut. I mean, yeah, you'll pay attention to analytics some, but I think with at least the offense that we've seen through these first 2 games, you should be confident that a 4th and 5 shouldn't be a problem. Like you said, if you're on your side of the field within the 40, you got to feel pretty good about getting that, especially with Petrino calling plays. I going back and looking at last week's tape, I don't think there's very many plays that I would have questioned. The only one that I had is maybe in overtime, running it with Rodney Hill, your smaller back, up the middle. Other than that, I think he called a great game, especially you look at that late play to Luke Haas where, he was wide open down the middle and scored a touchdown off of it.
Heck, that wheel route that
it was Rodney Hill again.
Yeah, it was Rodney Hill. The throw was just short. Taylor short-armed him. That was a touchdown. That would have changed the game a little bit. But, it's all that's hindsight's 2020. The good thing is you've got that film to go watch and understand, okay, I've got to do this better. I've got to do that better. We did this quite well. Let's try to emulate that in the upcoming game. You get all those things. And I thought that Oklahoma State game was a prime example of a lot of things to do and a lot of things not to do. So plenty to learn from, plenty to try to repeat if possible. And, obviously see if you can eliminate the mistakes and play a cleaner game against UAB.
Yeah, and I think one of those things like, Taylor short on him that throw and, maybe not necessarily hitting his receivers completely in stride. I think that'll come with chemistry. These guys have chemistry. There's no doubt. But in-game chemistry is a little bit different than, scrimmaging yourself in practice and whatnot. When you're taking live hits and, you're going up against a true opponent, that's going to come as they play more games and they'll be more in sync, if you will. And so, unfortunately we saw Taylor short arm that throw to Rodney Hill, but
it was the right read though.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. He understood where he needed to go with the ball. It was just a little bit of a poorly executed throw, but overall I thought Taylor played a good game. And that's another one of the things I'm going to be watching. Does his accuracy improve a little bit, even on plays that we make? There were several catches that receivers didn't necessarily bail him out, but they made a a tougher catch than that play should have been, just due to a ball that was, we're talking a game of inches or a foot behind them. So they're having to reach kind of behind their shoulder instead of catching it in stride, things like that. Can we do a little bit better? Is the timing there? I think a lot of that just really boils down to the reps and the timing of when these guys start to come out of their cuts. Where does this ball need to be based off that guy's speed, that guy's length? That you only get that from repetitions with these guys, and I think you're going to start seeing Luke Haas get more reps. I just think they need some of that game play chemistry to build a little bit more to where, okay, when I'm scrambling, Luke Haas is the guy I'm looking for because he's one of the best ones at understanding where to fall into in a zone or how to beat his man or show his numbers to the quarterback. I think you'll start to see that similarly how we saw, Luke Haas develop that with KJ last year. It wasn't just from the start in game one. After a couple games in, he was really looking good and unfortunately got hurt in the A&M game when he was looking about his best. So can he kind of develop that with Taylor similarly to how he did KJ? I think you'll start to see Luke Haas get more and more of those targets. And just as long as he can start hitting these guys a little bit more accurately, bump that completion percentage up from 57-ish or whatever it was up to 65 or something like that, 60 minimum. It's not a big ask. It's just, hit the ones you're supposed to hit a little bit more often. That wheel route that's wide open, you can't miss that. You know what I mean? That's a prime example. So get those corrected, and we're going to be in good shape. This is a prime game to do it, and then you can carry that momentum in to the Auburn game, which is going to be a tough game, but a winnable game, and that's going to be, kind of similar to last week, another good eye test for us to see where we are.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, those live game reps are, they're valuable, and I think, like you said, that timing is going to just get better. And see, a good point here, question, since Sam's seat is so hot, why would he not cycle through running backs or try different kickers? Wouldn't all the options be open at the point? I agree. And Sam even said that in the press conference on Monday, that we've got to start getting some of these other running backs in the game earlier, so you don't have as much exhaustion towards the end of the game. Kickers, yes, I 100% agree. We saw Ramsey, get the call, missed 2 kicks on Saturday. So maybe you see what Matthew Shipley can do, give him an opportunity. I don't think you rule it out, especially like Sam said, until it was going to be Ramsey that's going to be ran out there first. And, you saw some missed kicks. So I wouldn't be surprised in this game to see maybe Matthew Shipley get the opportunity to go out there and kick some field goals if we do kick field goals.
Yeah, but I'm right with you. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was going to say the same thing about Shipley. Even if you just put him out there on the PATs, if you don't have a lot of field goal opportunities, if you are going for it more often, get him some in-game reps and just see what his consistency looks like and his timing can tell you a lot on, how confident he will be when it comes to field goal time. So that's the one I want to see. The running backs, I know we're not fully healthy. I know that was half the reason that Hill was in the game at the end, just to answer his question here. That's why I think Hill was in the game a little bit more often at the end. Jaquinton was having some cramp issues. I'm not sure why Braylon Russell wasn't in a little bit more often than he was. Probably just experience. He's a freshman, got some maybe potential jitters, things like that in that type of environment. You don't want to just throw him to the wolves like that. But I think his body would have been a little bit better on that last play. And then I know Rashad DeBinion hasn't been fully healthy. I think this week is probably the healthiest he's been, and he's projected to get a little bit more work. So we'll see. But I think that's kind of the answer to the running back issues. Probably just going with the guys that they trusted the most from an experience standpoint to not turn the ball over.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're right there as far as like with DeBinion, it's been Sam doesn't want to put him out there until he's healthy because you don't want to re-injure him or him be, 80-90% and not full go. And so I think he said that this week he's looking much better. And so I think this would be a good week, like you said, to kind of ease him in there. He didn't have any carries in the Oklahoma State game. You saw him have a handful in the UAPB game. So I think it's one of those things where you probably want to get in some carries this week going into SEC conference play starting next week because that level of competition is about to ramp up. But yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to watch and see how much more rotation you see in this game earlier in the game in that first half between running backs, because Jaquinton had 24 carries in this game. That's a lot. I mean, not to say like if he's if he has a hot hand, let him run the ball. But to maybe save some of those carries for, second half in the game into maybe some more clutch situations, because most of those carries came in the first half. You saw him score 3 touchdowns in the first half of that Oklahoma State game. So we'll see. Maybe you see more Braylon Russell, and I think he's one of those guys. He's a talented freshman, and the more he plays, the better he's going to look. And, it's like we said before, that in-game experience, that's invaluable. So the more you can get that for him, the more you'll be able to rely on him, such as those overtime situations where maybe you put in your big back to run it up the middle instead of your smaller kind of pass catching back in Rodney Hill.
Yeah, and for everybody talking about the conditioning, mainly Gundy, but some other people have commented about it as well. I don't think this game came down to conditioning for us. I thought we were just as well conditioned, maybe a little less deep than they were, and that might have hurt us. If this game doesn't go to overtime, I mean, I didn't see any conditioning issues, even though we didn't run all of our guys out there that are in our running back stable. Granted, like we said, we had some cramps with Jaquindon late, but kind of a hot day, not terribly hot, but at least hot enough to have issues with that, considering the workload he had. I mean, he had 150 yards. Dude was all over the place, and even on plays he wasn't, picking up yards. If it wasn't a run play, he was still out there chipping block, running around routes, things like that. So he got his money's worth, if you will, in that game. So I don't think conditioning is going to be too big of an issue, even in this UAB game. I think the weather's going to be fairly warm again. I don't think that'll be too much of a problem. And I think this will be a game where hopefully the score gets to where you can kind of emulate what you did against UAPB and have some of your starters get a little bit more rest. That's not going to be a bad thing going into Auburn the next week. So if you can pull most of your starters, late in the third quarter, midway into the fourth quarter, something like that, let Malachi get in there and get some more reps, get him, that much more game experience. I thought he looked great. Granted, who's not going to look great against UAPB? I mean, everybody was open. Even when they weren't open, they were still open. It was just this will be a little bit better matchup, I think. UAB does have 10 or 11 guys that used to play in the SEC that transferred to their team. Granted, I don't think any of them were just, phenomenal or nothing like that. But
I was about to say they transferred for a reason.
Yeah, they've got talent, though. This is not a D3 type team, kind of how we would think about UAPB. They're just not quite on the same level. UAB is definitely tougher than that. So this will be another good test, but I still think we've got a good potential to put up quite a bit of yards, put up quite a bit of points, get some other guys some reps, and keep guys' legs a little bit more fresh for SEC play starting the week after.
Yeah, 100% there. And that kind of leads into talking about our next topic here with depth chart questions and, what was addressed today in the press conference with Jalen Braxton was a little bit banged up after last week. Pittman said he's been dealing with a little bit of tendonitis, said that he's not 100% sure where he's going to be at this week. He thinks he should be able to, get some reps in the practice and towards this end of the week to be able to go. Hudson Clark, he's probably doubtful for this weekend per Pittman. Said he had some MRI on his back earlier this week, and that he tweaked his back against an Oklahoma State game. I think Pittman said he played 8 snaps or so on defense, and then you had him playing some on special teams that just really couldn't go. So, he's the guy that, rest him up this week, get him ready for conference play. Let some of these younger DBs and corners get some experience against a team like UAB that, like we said, should be the win, and let them get some experience in those live in-game reps. And then Marquise Cuddy Robinson should be good to go this week. He was on track to play last week, but Pittman said he got a stinger in pregame warmups and kind of one side went numb, and that he said that usually goes away, but he wasn't able to go. But he said he should be a full go for this weekend. And you still have your guys, the Metcalf kids, Jaheim Singletary, Keon Stewart, some of those other guys that should be able to kind of step up. And maybe you see Selman Bridges, the 4-star freshman that came in, get some reps in this game while you're letting some of these other guys get healthy.
Yeah, I think I believe it's TJ Metcalf that's been playing back up to Hudson Clark, if you will, sharing some time out there with him. He's really been phenomenal so far. He's played great in the reps that he's been out there. I don't think there's any drop off at all there. I think Hudson maybe, obviously has the experience to recognize plays a little bit, but what Hudson had in that, I think TJ makes up for just in speed and athleticism. So they are a good balance there. So I don't think we're going to have any tremendous drop off if Hudson is unavailable for this game with TJ Metcalf kind of covering that. So good to see Cuddy Robinson back. I know he was one of the premier corners, if you will, per Pittman that was scheduled to start most of the season over a couple of guys, maybe as a surprise. So it's good to see that he's healthy. Hopefully he can stay healthy because I know he's going to be a big piece for us, especially if Jalen Braxton is limited. So good to have him back.
And don't forget, you'll still have Danico Slaughter, the Tennessee transfer, as well as Tevis Metcalf, and then you still got Akari Johnson, Jaden Johnson, Larry Worth, some of those other guys that will be able to kind of step up and take on some of those roles. If
Singletary, hopefully as well. He had some not great looks, but then he had some really good pass breakups.
I mean, he had the pick against.
Yeah, he had some good plays for sure. Had a couple questionable coverages. Things almost looked busted, but he made up for it quite a bit on some other plays. So hopefully he can kind of shore those mistakes up and then keep playing that lockdown. That's tough, but he's got the talent too.
Yeah, 100%. And then as you jump over, so what we need to know about UAB. So going in and talking about some of their key players, the one guy that we're going to talk about here, Jacob Zeno, their starting quarterback. He's 6'4", 210. He is a transfer. He transferred from Baylor and after the 2021 season. So he's a guy that has, at the time, Power 5 experience. So far on the season, he's 45 of 64 for 70%, has 382 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and then 16 carries on the ground for 34 yards. So a guy that's in similar build to, what we saw in KJ last year and similar to Taylor this year, maybe not as tall, but a guy that, is mobile enough that, he can get himself out of trouble. A guy that they're going to line up in multiple different formations and sets with this guy. But he's a guy that, he's been around a little bit. He's got some experience. He's a senior for this team. Trent Dilfer, former Super Bowl winning quarterback coaching this UAB team.
Yeah, I think he's going to be decent. I do look at our defensive line, and I think we can keep him contained, plus make his life a little bit miserable back there. I think we've got some decent matchups there, especially if guys like Landon Jackson kind of start coming into their own. He's had a quiet season, not a bad season by any means. He's disrupting a lot of plays that don't show up on the stat sheet, but he's had a more quiet season than I think some people would expect. But you got to give some credit to the other guys that are getting there, getting home, getting those tackles before Landon can even get there, like Nico Davier really comes to mind. Davlier, however you pronounce his name. I still am not sure. Yeah, Anton has been really good.
Cam Ball, Eric Gregory.
Yeah, Cam Ball especially. He's been very disruptive kind of in the interior of that line. There's a reason, that not anybody is just really flexed some crazy numbers on the defensive lines because it's getting shared fairly well because they're all doing their job. So that's a good thing to see. But I do expect, Landon to start breaking out of that shell and asserting himself, especially if, teams start seeing, man, we can't really double him because now we're letting Cam Ball through every single play and he is tearing us up. It's just going to provide that much more balance where each of them gets their own. I thought we had good linebacking play against Oklahoma State. Xavier Sorey played very well. Unfortunately, had that bad penalty at the end, which he kind of suplexed the guy. It was questionable in my opinion. He didn't bring him up over his head. It was just kind of, I don't know. Probably a little bit unnecessary. But overall, he had a really good game. He was flying around. So a lot of these guys are stepping up. So I think they've got potential to disguise some coverages, maybe have a couple of linebacker or safety blitzes and things, spice it up a little bit, not just only rush 4. Because I think you've got the guys on the back end to cover a little bit more in this game than maybe we did against Oklahoma State, especially considering we were so run-stopping mentality, if you will. So I look to see us pick up a couple of sacks here if possible. I think that's going to be the expectation. And if you put up another 0 in the sack category, that's not going to be a good thing against this team for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And, that's a question here that we've just been kind of talking around. If the
Oh,
D line doesn't get any sacks or hurries this week again, is it time to start worrying about the D line? And I think Pittman had a great answer for a very similar question after the Oklahoma State game is, it just comes down to the fact that some of these other guys have to step up, Junekaj, Davier, and be playing more consistent as far as getting pressure, Eric Gregory, Campbell, because he said what you're running into right now is these teams are doubling or chipping Landon, and that's why he's not able to necessarily get there as fast as what we think he should be doing. And so, yeah, I think there's pressure on some of these other guys to step up. I mean, you brought in Junekaj, was highly, ranked coming out of the FCS class, but he's got to bring that play to the next level. He's a guy that at the FCS level last year had 15 sacks, I believe it was, which is a lot, but can he elevate his game? And, Pittman mentioned he's looked great in fall camp once he got healthy. Davier is a guy that's been around. You would like to see him have a breakout year this year. Eric Gray is another guy that's been around. And, who knows, maybe some of these young guys can also step up it, if some of these older guys aren't performing. You got Ian Geffard, Quincy Rhodes is another one that comes to mind. That's a younger guy that we're hoping to see some development out of this year.
Yeah, and I really do think that this game will be a better scheming matchup for us to be a little bit more blitz happy, especially if we get in some good down and distance situations. It's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 20. Who knows? Sometimes we're too prone to drop back in coverage on those, in my opinion, and give quarterbacks too much time. But I look to see us maybe be a little bit more aggressive in pass rushing and not sell out for the run and plugging run lanes where they're awaiting the running back to come their way, where they're not pinning their ears back and really trying to get off their block and blow by a guy. That's how you can miss tackles in the run game. But I think this will be a more balanced approach where we're a little bit more aggressive from time to time. I don't think we're going to be, extremely blitz heavy, but I think Travis Williams understands what this D-line needs to do to rush some quarterbacks, timing to where we can maybe get some more turnovers than we have. I think that's something that I'd like to see a little bit more of, is some forced turnovers, similar to what Oklahoma State did against us on that play with Taylor Green throwing the pick six. That was not a mistake by Taylor Green necessarily. It was just he got hit as he was throwing it. It's a forced turnover or forced fumbles, things like that. So can we be a little bit more disruptive than we have been, be a little bit more aggressive, but not to the point that we give up some big plays for no reason? I think we're trying to find that happy medium, and teams like this are a prime example to find that with. So if we can kind of find our stride here, especially on pass rushing, things like that, I think that'll bode well to go up against Auburn the next week and give Peyton Thorne another really rough week.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things like this week you're not having to go in and game plan for a guy like Ollie Gordon that had 1,700 yards last year. It's going to be a different approach, and I think that's what you're going to see, like you said, Seth. And I think Travis Williams, comparatively to Barry Odom, he's a guy that he's not afraid to blitz or pin his ears back early in early downs or things like that. Where we saw a lot of more preventative coverages from Barry Odom, and that could be an account to roster and kind of what our depth was then. But I'm excited to see what our scheming looks like this weekend. Can we get some of these guys going? Just get them some confidence. Let them get some sacks in or some pressure, something like that, and maybe that's the fuel they need to get going. And we were talking about the running back here, so for UAB, they have their running back, Lee Beebe Jr., 5'10", 220, 29 carries on the season for 144 yards, 2 touchdowns, 5 receptions for 36 yards. Jaquindon Jackson had those numbers in one game. So
against the number 16 team at the time. So, you got to be, realistic here. I think this, like we've said, it's a more balanced team that we're trying to stop defensively. And so I think that lets our scheme be more balanced on how we approach them.
I agree there. And then when you look at their receiving core, their main wide receiver, Cam Shanks, he's quite a smaller guy, 5'8", 180, not the biggest guy out there, but he's their reception leader with 10 with 116 yards, 0 touchdowns. And then, first 2 weeks for UAB, they beat Alcorn State week 1, 41-3. Lost to UL Monroe last week, 32-6. So this is a team that I think they're struggling a little bit right now. Even, Coach Dilfer admitted that they were struggling a little bit, but I think this is another, like we said at the kind of top of this segment here, is I think this is a bounce back game in a sense of we looked good last week. This is a game to come in and clean up those mistakes that we had last week that kind of were those determining factors. And so come out, have a clean game, put up some more yards. That's one thing that we didn't mention here is Arkansas is currently number 2 in the, in all of college football for total offense, with over, I think, 1,300 yards so far between UAPB and Oklahoma State last weekend. I think we're averaging 667 yards per game. That'll come back down to earth as we start playing conference play. But this team is not shy to having explosive plays with Bobby Petrino back calling plays. And I mean, even Trent Dilfer in some of his interviews this week said that he would easily put Petrino up on the Mount Rushmore play callers as far as in college football throughout the years. He's a guy that you can't really figure him out. It's like it seems as a defensive coordinator, you feel like you got him figured out, and then he throws you a curveball, and he's a guy that it seems like a lot of people were thinking maybe time had passed him by a little bit. I think if it's safe to say through these first 2 games, week 1 you might question it because it was just UAPB, and any team could really do that. But you go on the road against a Oklahoma State team that could be vying for the Big 12 championship game, and he called a pretty good game. So
I completely agree. I think everywhere he's gone, he's provided an offensive spark for that team. The one exception, maybe A&M. Granted,
I think you got to put an asterisk there.
You got to put an asterisk there. He wasn't there long enough for one thing. Plus, from reports, he wasn't able to use his own lingo and vernacular.
So it really wasn't his own offense.
Yeah, he was trying to implement his offense just with different terminologies and different play name. Like, that would be hard. So I think there was a unfair learning curve that even he was trying to adjust to. And so that's tough. So I think the shoe fits better here where, Pittman's really just kind of like, hey, man, this is your offense. I'm going to provide you with the best offensive line I can. You provide me with the best skill, the best plays, the best design, the best scheme, those types of things, and the best quarterback play you can, because that's what you're good at. And hopefully we can make a really good symbiotic relationship here and win some games that maybe we shouldn't win just due to scheming and coaching and things, where I think last year we lost some games due to scheming and coaching. So anyway, I'm like we said in the recap, I'm not trying to drink the Kool-Aid too much yet, but it does taste kind of good.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's one of those things like, the big thing was Pittman told Petrino, hey, go out and get your quarterback. Who he chose and went after was Taylor Green specifically. It wasn't kind of settling for him. He went out and specifically went out and got him because they tried to recruit him at Missouri State. And, Petrino said when he was at Missouri State, yeah, he's a great player. I'd love to have him, but there's no way we're getting him at this, smaller school compared to like he got an offer from Boise State, a Power 5, school. So that I think that shows a lot there. And then, yeah, another great fact here, a lot of eyes will be on Scott Fountain's adjustments this week in special teams. They go unnoticed until it's noticeable, and it costs you some issues. Field goals, those punts, and like Seth said at the beginning, I think you've got to go back and either go back to the drawing board and work with some of these guys or make some adjustments on who's on these punt coverage teams, because you can't have your guy being blocked into and falling into your return man and causing him to, fumble the ball. We got lucky on that first time that it happened that Isaiah was able to hold onto the ball. The second time, unfortunately, didn't go our way. And I think that's because it was some younger guys on the punt team. I want to say, I think one of the times it might have been one of the Metcalf boys, and then the other one was, I think they said Cross Johnson, one of the other younger receivers on the team. So, maybe you replace those guys with some experienced, players that can have a better idea But it's all about positioning and knowing where you're at. If you know you're getting close, maybe adjust how you're blocking your guy to a different way. That way, if you get pushed down or you get, bulldozed over, you're not falling into your return man and potentially costing your team a turnover.
Yeah, and so we talked about this. I don't think it was on the show. I think it was just me and you. But I I think there needs to be some questions asked. Okay, hey, if this is something that we can say we continue to struggle with this against UAB, do we even return punts? Do you just line Isaiah back up? You don't have anybody really run back there. He just calls a fair catch every time just to save the roll yardage or things like that. But you don't risk that at that point. Granted, you're eliminating somebody that's got tremendous speed and tremendous play breaking ability, but let's be real. I mean, how often are you going to rip off a touchdown return or even a 10+ yard return versus risking giving the ball back on you get a crucial defensive stop and you muff a punt? That's like worst case scenario. They just got a 30, 40, 50 yard gain off of a punt when you're supposed to be off the field, just the way that those rules work. So I don't really want to go that route, but I think there needs to be some conjecture and conversation about how we even go back to block for our return man, if you will, and what those plays even look like. So I'm curious to see when we do force punts. I'm hoping we force quite a few. What do we look like? Have we made some tremendous adjustments or just execute better, have more spatial awareness, whatever the case may be, have a better understanding of the team's punter that you're going against? I think that's part of it. You might be going against a really good punter that's booming them 50, 55 yards. You've got a little bit more yardage to work with on average. Or if you're going up against somebody that doesn't have that much of a leg, you have to adjust. So that's going to be a big key in my mind. Obviously, the field goals, I think we kicked field goals at the right times, just didn't make them when we needed to. Obviously, the one at the end of the game made the longish one to keep it going, but definitely should have
One
had
of
a
those
couple
missed
of them.
was dead center. So
Yeah, and it was just ugly. Definitely an ugly kick. So part of that's probably on your kicker. Some of that may be on your holder. I don't know. That you got a lot of new guys kind of in that area. So if you're able to make some corrections or run out a different kicker that maybe has got better confidence in game, sure, they might look different in practice. That's one thing that Sam talked about preseason. I'm excited to see, some of these guys that step up and play a little bit better when the pressure's on in a game situation and which ones, kind of crumble under that pressure. Maybe we're seeing that in our kicking battle and we just haven't used Shipley enough in game to actually really get a full analyzation of that. So those are two big things that I think we need to see some adjustments from Scott Fountain, or at least some improvements on, where you can tell that it's been addressed, talked about. The players understand it. They understand the criticality of executing on special teams. Special teams is not a big part of the game until it is. You know what I mean? So very, very good point here. That I think definitely has some areas to be corrected. It probably the biggest areas to be corrected. I think another small area we haven't talked about it a whole lot. Receive the ball into your hands, whether you're getting it on a handoff, a pitch, catching the ball on a wide receiver route. Make sure you are completing that catch before you look up field to run. That gets us every year. It gets every team every year. Players do it all the time. It's hard not to, especially if you hear somebody coming up on you. It's tough to not to want to look up and see where you're needing to cut, where you're needing to juke as soon as possible, but you have to secure that catch first, especially on pitch plays. That cost us big time dearly from Jaquindon. So I'm looking to see that type of correction as well across all the players. We had the near fumble in the end zone against the UAPB, I believe. Player about dropped the ball too early going into the end zone. Things like that. It's the small stuff like that you've got to get your mind right and remember in game, not let the moment get too big for you and get too excited during some of those types of plays. Stay level, stay mindful, and then execute cleanly. Those are the big things I'm going to be looking for this week.
I was about to say that's mine. Looking at it, I would, if I had to kind of rate how I felt about the issues we had on with turnovers, that interception by Taylor and that bad toss, I'm not, they're at the bottom. I'm not necessarily worried about that because those are weird things that probably aren't going to happen quite often, knock on wood there. But more of the special teams with punt returns and kicking, that's what I would be a little bit more focused on because, I just pulled it up here looking at the stats. Ramsey's the only kicker that's attempted kicks in a game.
Yep.
He's 14 of 14 on extra points, which, for the most part, those are gimmies. When you get over to the field goal, he's 1 of 3, 33%. You can't.
We're not used to
have
that.
that. But to be fair, not trying to defend him 100% here. Your job is to kick the ball. All 3 of his, field goal attempts were between 40 to 49 yards. So they were deeper kicks. But still, like we said, that one at the end there that was missed, or one of the ones that was missed was dead center, and he just, pulled it left. So
got to make those corrections, whatever the case is there, whether it's personnel, execution. I don't, there's a lot of ways you can address it, but definitely some things to correct. And, we talked about it before the season even started. We're not going to look as, hopefully, knock on wood, I think this is going to be the trajectory as long as we stay at least mostly healthy. We're not going to look like the same team in week 1 and 2 and 3 as we will week 9, 10, 11, hoping that a lot of these things develop and, materialize into really good portions of our game as the year goes on. I don't think you're going to have Cam Little replaced. That's just not going to happen. So I do, like I said earlier in the show, I do think you're going to start seeing us go for it when you're kind of in that no man's land area, between the 40, 30, 25 range. I think if you get inside the 25, you might have a little bit more confidence there. But if you're on our side of the 40 and you need 5 yards or less, I think we're going to start going for it maybe even more often. And if we don't get it, it's not fun. It sucks. You give them decent field position, but it's not like you're turning over tremendous field position. Especially considering if you punted it out the back of the end zone or something, they're getting at the 20. So not a lot of net yardage there. So I think it's worth the risk, especially considering our kicking game currently, to try to go for it, extend drives, get some extra plays out of a drive that you might not would have originally. I think that risk is worth it, especially with the playmakers that we have and the way Taylor is able to extend plays. Even if it's a kind of a busted play on 4th and 5, sometimes he might be able to pick that up with his legs. I think he's athletic enough to do that. So you have more options than, just passing the ball in that scenario. So I'm going to be kind of anxious to see where those play calls occur. If we see any of that this week against UAB, we may not. We were pretty dang good on 3rd down against UAPB. Hopefully we're just that good against UAB and don't have a lot of 4th down scenarios. But if we do, especially in that kind of no man's land zone, I'm going to be real anxious to see, what our calls are, how aggressive we are, and how conservative we are on the flip side. So,
yeah, I agree. When you look at our roster, I think, maybe you turn to some of your young guys, because if you look at just all of the kickers on Arkansas's roster, you've got guys that, both Ramsey and Matthew Shipley are senior/redshirt seniors. Your other kickers on the roster, you've got Charlie Vondermiden. He's just a freshman. He was a 5-star freshman that came in. And then you also got Vito Calvaruso, familiar name. He's been here before, transferred out, transferred back in. Do you give him a shot? If neither of these guys are working, because, that's one thing that even if you don't kick them a lot, there's going to be some late game situations that's going to be crucial for you to make a field goal where you're on the edge of, do you go for it, or do you, want to take the chance for this kick to either win or tie a game? And so, we'll see what happens there. Charlie Vondermeiden so far kicked off 3 times for Arkansas for 192 yards, averaging 62 yards. Had a pair of touchbacks in the season opener against Arkansas Pine Bluff. He may be a guy that's trying to redshirt. Who knows? But I think it's one of those things where you really need to get it figured out real quick. And then another good point here. Coach his clock management should improve week to week as much as we expect our players to improve, especially, if you think offensively. I would almost say that Petrino's really handling clock management there offensively, on how he's running things there. And maybe he comes to Sam or wants his input on things. But if you're looking at there, and then defensively, there may be some times where Pittman overrules it, but I think I would say for the most part, you have your coordinators, depending on which units on the field, handling that clock management.
Yeah, I think for the most part, I do think it's Sam's responsibility to call timeouts, but he has to get communicated, from his coordinators if they are wanting a timeout. I believe. I don't think they're allowed to call the timeouts themselves. I'm not sure on that. I know that's like an NFL rule, but I really don't know if that's a college rule or not. That said, that might be why we saw that like 5-second delay there towards the end of the game where we needed to call an offensive timeout, and it looked like it took an extra couple of seconds than you would traditionally think it would. Might have been just the communication. Hey, Sam, I need a timeout. Give me a timeout. Boom, then it happens. There's a couple seconds there. I'm hoping that improves. I think that's one of the things that will improve just with chemistry of these coaches all working together in conjunction. Especially obviously with Petrino on staff. He's got plenty of experience in those types of scenarios. So I thought we did a decent job there late in the game, kind of with that 2-minute drill there at the end of the game, if you will, handling the majority of that. There was 1 or 2 plays that I thought took too long to get called in and developed and snapped, things like that. But overall, I didn't think it was just an abysmal display of clock management like we've seen in some games last year that come to mind. It
wasn't Mississippi State last year where you don't call the timeout, get a delay game, you get pushed out of field goal range.
Now you got a punt. It was just, dude, I didn't see anything obviously as egregious as that. But to Pigpen's point here, I think that's an area that can improve week in and week out. And I'm hoping that it just does naturally as these coaches get more and more reps together in these games and understand what they're trying to achieve, especially in those late clock scenarios, or even if it's not necessarily a late clock scenario, just understand, is it okay to go ahead and just take this 5-yard penalty here for a delay of game rather than burn one of my timeouts, things like that. We saw that early in this one when I think it was intentional to give our punter more room. He drops it at the 2 afterwards, so it worked out perfectly. But that's a prime example where I think even in the past we'd called a timeout and then like, oh, crap, I kind of regret that. We should have just taken the 5-yard penalty and punted. We're going to punt anyway. Maybe it would have given us a little bit more room to pin them deeper with. But anyhow, I think those things will improve week in and week out, especially as these coaches work together more.
I agree 100%. So, Arkansas kickoff at 3:15 on Saturday in Razorback Stadium for the first home game before you have another road stretch between going to Auburn, going to Dallas to play A&M before you're back at home again. So, if you got the chance to get out there and go, if you got some extra tickets you aren't using, let's fill those seats and, support this team as they have their first true home game of the season. Before we get out of here, we're going to run through some SEC matchups for this week. First off, you got number 4 Alabama traveling to Wisconsin. Alabama is a 16-point favorite in this game. What do you think about this matchup here, Seth, for Alabama going on the road in a, I want to say tough environment. It's going to be a chilly kickoff, mid-60s for this game.
I think they'll be fine. I think they have started a little bit slower than most fans wanted this season, but let's be real, man. All these players are having to adjust. They've got a lot of new players, too. They had a lot of guys transfer out, a lot of guys transfer in. Granted, they've got tremendous talent. Milrose back, so they've got a good quarterback, got a good line. I think they've just kind of got to get their rhythm. This will be a game where I think that they can do that on the road. And this sounds weird. I think they'll actually be better off the fact that they're playing on the road with less fan expectation than they would at home, considering where this team's at right now. I think they'll come out here, and I think they're going to cover the spread and win.
Okay, yeah. I can see that, too. I think it'll be an interesting road test for the Crimson Tide.
I don't think Wisconsin's good enough to hold them less than, 2 or 3 score margin. I think Alabama wins this one by 20 points.
Yeah, I can see that. Next up here, you have number 16 LSU at South Carolina in a surprising choice for College Game Day this week. I didn't see this one coming, but LSU is the 7-point favorite on the road at Williams-Brice Stadium in South Carolina. I'll start off here. I think maybe LSU takes this one. I don't know if I've seen enough out of the first-year starter in Lamont Sellers, I believe is his name, the quarterback for South Carolina, and you have Rock in the backfield as well. But, I think Brian Kelly's got this LSU team in a little bit better spot than, Beamer Ball down in South Carolina.
Yeah, I think I agree. And the spread's probably about right. 7-point spread's probably close. I don't know. Don't be surprised if South Carolina can pull something crazy here. LSU is good. I don't think they're quite as good as they hoped they were going to be yet. They could turn into that. Granted, Brian Kelly is a great coach. I don't think they're quite what they are hoping they're going to turn into yet, though. And South Carolina absolutely smacked Kentucky last week, and I think they looked better than a lot of people thought. I figure that's partially why game day is going there. And then the other part is there's no other good matchups for them to go to. So this is probably the best one available, if you will, just based off what South Carolina's done this season so far. So I think this will end up being a good game. My gut tells me to pick LSU, but for some reason, I think South Carolina's got a chance to pull off a sneaky upset late with like a field goal or something. I think South Carolina might win this one. I don't know why. That's just kind of what I'm thinking since it's
I was about to say,
South Carolina.
Can't rule anything out there.
That's the game that's rocking, man.
The game that I'm circling here and that I could have seen as another possibility for game day, number 24 Boston College is going into Columbia, Missouri to take on the number 6 ranked Missouri Tigers, and Missouri's favored by 7 in this one. You saw Boston College, team that knocked off Florida State, which at the time they were still ranked, but they're not as great as, I guess, as expected. So, I think this will be a good test for Missouri. I've said it before, and even on, Saturday Showdown, another one of the variety sports shows, that I'm not a believer in Missouri yet. I think they're riding a little bit of their success from last year. They've won the games they're supposed to this year so far. Here's a first test for them. But we'll revisit how I feel about Missouri midway through the season once they play some SEC opponents. They'll play Alabama here in a few weeks. They could potentially be, I can't believe I'm saying this, playing an undefeated Vanderbilt team next week.
Which is wild. Props to Vanderbilt for making some improvements, man. Let's be real. They're a better team than they used to be. I still don't think they're, anywhere tremendous, but they've provided some surprises this year, that's for sure. This game, though, I think Missouri will win this game. I think they've got the experience. They've got a good quarterback, very good receiver core. I know Boston College is good, but I don't think that they're maybe as good as they're hoping, considering that excuse me.
Bless you there.
Sorry about that. I don't think they're quite as good as maybe they're hoping they are, just due to some of the teams that they have knocked off. Haven't really been knockoffs, I guess. Anyhow, I think this will be a close game. I think the spread is probably about right on this one, with it being about a 7-point spread. That's probably accurate. I expect Missouri to win. I think it might be a little lower scoring than some people think, maybe that 20s to 30s range.
Yeah, I could see that. Another one that, there's not much time to be spent on this one. Tulane at number 15, Oklahoma. Oklahoma's favored by 13.5. Tulane did play Kansas State close last week. We caught part of that game, but, I think Oklahoma State being a defensive-minded team, I think they probably take care of business in this one.
I agree. That said, I feel this sounds crazy saying it, even though it's not a big spread. I feel like that spread's too big, just with how Oklahoma has struggled to score the ball. They'll probably cover that, considering they might catch a couple of defensive touchdowns, things like that. But Oklahoma's got to prove that they can score the ball on offense. I haven't seen that yet very well. They struggled last week against Houston, I believe it was.
Yes.
Barely won that game, frankly. So they are, Brent Venables is a very good defensive coach. This is turning into a defensive team, which is weird to even say about Oklahoma. They've been such an offensive-minded team for so long, thinking back to the Lincoln Riley days and stuff. So I think they'll win this game. I'm not sure they'll cover the spread, though. I think they might only win by around 10.
Okay. Yeah. Next up, you have Texas A&M taking on Florida at Florida. A&M is favored in this game by -4. This one's, I found myself going back and forth on, Florida, and Billy Napier on the hot seat immensely has said he's going to play both Mertz and Lagway this week. And, teams that usually play multiple quarterbacks, it does not work well. I mean, you saw that for Oklahoma State at the beginning of last year. They tried to play 3 different quarterbacks, and you have your offense trying to kind of run 2 different schemes, if you will, for each guy. Where, I mean, you look at Florida, Lagway is a very much dual threat quarterback that is very athletic, has a lot of talent, whereas Mertz is more of your pocket guy, can get you out of trouble with his legs if you need him to, but would really rather stay in the pocket and make the throw. So I'm leaning towards A&M in this one, just because even though it is at Florida, Florida did not look good week 1 against Miami. They looked really bad. They did what they're supposed to against Samford last week, let Lagway get some experience. But, I mean, it'll be an interesting SEC matchup.
I got A&M winning this one. I got them winning by more than 4 too. I think Florida is just really not good. I don't think they've been able to figure out their identity, and I think they're going to continue struggling with that. And the more you try to play 2 quarterbacks, the more you're going to struggle with that. They don't run the ball that well either. And Texas A&M's defense is quite good, in my opinion. They're maybe not what they hoped they were, considering how the Notre Dame game went, but that team's not bad. I think they're going to find themselves, and they do have a very good defensive coach in Elko now. And I think their defense will give them this win, even if their offense doesn't necessarily do the best. I think this is going to be a lower scoring game as well. I don't think either of these teams have a tremendous offensive, units. So A&M, I think, will provide some spark just on their defensive alone to win this game.
Yeah, I agree. If I'm Billy Napier and my seat's as hot as his is, I'm playing my talented freshman, over the experience.
What do you got to lose, man? I mean,
the upside there. You know what you're getting out of Mertz. He's been around long enough. You know what he looks like at his best. What's that upside for Lagway, and what can you get out of him? So up next, this one, Ole Miss at Wake Forest. Ole Miss by 24. I think that's accurate. They're playing an ACC team in Wake Forest, but Jackson Dart's looked really good this season so far. As gross of that is to say, but I think Ole Miss goes down and takes care of business pretty easily.
Yeah, I think so too. This Wake Forest team isn't as good as they have been in years past either, so bad matchup for them. I think Ole Miss is going to come in and absolutely steamroll.
Yeah. Same for the next one here. UTSA at number 2 Texas. Texas favored by 35 points. Just don't hurt UTSA too bad. Let's see how much Arch Manning plays in this one as well. So,
yep.
Vanderbilt at Georgia State. Vanderbilt going on the road, 10.5-point favorite. Could be undefeated after this game. I'll take
put them in the top 25. Let's go.
And then number 1 Georgia at Kentucky. Georgia favored by 24. You saw what Kentucky happened last week. They got beat by South Carolina.
They got.
Georgia's just on a warpath this season so far. They got a chip on their shoulder after last year, and I hate to run into the buzzsaw that is this number 1 Georgia team. Yeah,
I completely agree. If Kentucky doesn't pull some things around and figure out their offense a little bit, they could get shut out in this game even. So I think they'll bounce back and have a better showing than they did against South Carolina. But you're playing Georgia. It's even if you do play better, you could still only put up 0. So this is going to be a tough game. New coach, new court. I mean, it's just a lot of newness there, and this Georgia team, I think, is going to take advantage of that.
Yeah. New Mexico at Auburn. Auburn favored by 28. That I feel like that's quite a big spread after what we saw last week. I think that's a little much. Auburn's going to have to figure out something. You can't have your starting quarterback that's experienced throwing 4 interceptions, and nothing against Cal, but just, an average Cal team. Yeah, they just had a very bad game.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with the spread. It should probably be more like 19, something like that in my mind. On paper, Auburn's tremendously more talented, so they should win this game fairly large. 28 seems like a lot considering Auburn's offensive deficiencies. If they can fix a couple of those, kind of similarly to even us. I mean, I can't talk too much. We struggled getting the ball in the end zone. put up plenty of yards, but just had some turnover issues. If they can fix their turnover issues, they might couldn't win this game by 28. I still think that's a little bit of a stretch. I think, 2-3 touchdowns is probably the max that they win it by, but they could score, 30, 40 points if they correct some problems. I personally hope they don't, but you could see that if they're able to fix some issues. I know Hugh Freeze is going to put the fear of God in them, so we'll see.
I was about to say, they put up 73 points week 1, so
they can score, but
what does it look like when the level of competition increases? So
yeah.
Next up, Toledo at Mississippi State. Mississippi State favored by 11.5. They went on the road and lost last week at Arizona State. I think this is another team that's one of those that's figuring out themselves under Jeff Lebby, first-year head coach. 2 games in so far. What he's done from where he's been, being at Oklahoma, being with Lane Kiffin a little bit. So he's more of an offensive guy, and they've got Blake Shapen that transferred over from Baylor. We'll see what they can get going, but this should be a win for them. But we'll see what happens in this game. I think this is probably a fair spread for this game.
I think that's a fair spread. I don't disagree with it because I don't know enough about this Toledo team. Toledo from a couple of years ago, I'd probably pick to win this game. I'm just not sure enough about them now. I think Mississippi State needs this bounce back. I think they're going to find a way to bounce it back, even if it comes down to just playing the fundamentals better, running the ball, establishing the line of scrimmage a little bit better. They should be able to, at least dominate the line of scrimmage to an extent and find a way to win just due to that alone. And they need to find a win. So I think they'll win this game no matter what it takes, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And as we wrap up here, Kent State at number 7, Tennessee. I think this is another one, the biggest spread of the weekend. Tennessee favored by 49 points. They went into a ranked NC State team last weekend and just blew them out by 40 points. I think you see that again, honestly. The golden flashes may not flash too much in this game.
Yeah, that's a big spread, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Tennessee cover it by 10 more points. I mean, that Tennessee team, they are potent to say the least, more so than I was thinking they might be, honestly. They've looked better than I even thought they would, and I thought they'd be a decent team this year.
I was about to say, Nico came out and has looked great so far.
Yeah, Coach Heupel, however you pronounce his name.
Yeah, Heupel.
Yeah, he's got them boys where they need to be. I'll give him that.
Yeah. And as we wrap up here, upcoming events for Arkansas volleyball will be taking on Tulsa on the road September 12th, 6:30 tomorrow. They'll be taking on Stephen F. Austin at home on Friday at 4 p.m. Arkansas football, we just talked about it. UAPB kickoff at 3:15 on Saturday. Should be a little bit warmer weekend than last weekend. I think the high is 88, 90 degrees, somewhere in that range. Arkansas men's tennis at USTA 15K September 16th through the 19th, and volleyball at Miami September 19th at 5 p.m. And before we get out of here, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you can find your podcast. Don't forget to continue to hit that like and subscribe button. That helps us comments. We love the interaction here. It makes it fun for all of us. And we thank you again for listening to today's episode of Hogs on the Hill. And we'll be right back with you for our recap show after this weekend on Sunday.